Alrighty, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Investment Advisory Committee. We'll have roll call, Joe,
Here.
Sabrina here, and then we have Eileen here. Alright, next thing we have is has everyone had time to review the approval of the meeting minutes from our regular meeting meeting on March 24th, 26th. I have reviewed them and I did not have any comments or changes. Joe, did you have anything?
I don't. If not,
Okay.
the chair will entertain a motion. I will
Yeah, go ahead.
motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
And I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, aye, the motion carries. Next, that takes us down to Meter Investment Management, Miss Eileen.
Hi. Well, thank you. Oops.
Here, let me get your,
Oh, yes.
let me hit that down. Hit it down.
Hit down.
Hit down.
All right.
And then I will go ahead and,
Oops, you need to bring it up, right?
yes.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Oh, you might have went down.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
That's really the
Well,
first
I think
slide
that's
with
where we're
data.
at.
Yes. Of me.
Thanks, Cassidy.
Thank you. Yeah, so, absolutely, I mean, thank you, as always, for the opportunity to provide an update here on what is going on in our crazy world that we live in, and how, what's happening with interest rates and how that impacts the county's investment portfolio. So as we know, the Fed did meet, on June 17th, and the result of that meeting was no change in the overnight rate. However, we have a new chairperson in place now, Fed Chairman Warsh, and we'll talk a little bit about what his view is as far as how the Federal Reserve will look going forward. But basically, coming out of that meeting, we know that he's taking these initial steps to build consensus within the team, within the committee. It's not there. We now have a very wide dispersion of expectations of where the overnight rate will land, and that's a function really of the uncertainty that we're experiencing here in the marketplace due to the on-again, off-again peace agreements, opening, closing of the Strait of Hormuz, the whole Iran conflict, and of course what the impact that has had on inflation, and how that is trickling down to the consumer level, of course, in the US. So at this stage, the market is expecting that perhaps by October, Fed may actually do one rate hike. Now, again, this is where we have really a wide range of opinions. Excuse me a minute, I just have to look at something I wanted to reference here real quick. Our investment team attended what is called the Cranes Money Fund Symposium just last week. What that symposium is that is where investment managers like Meter, all the way from the big boys, the BlackRocks of the world and the like, down to the medium-sized shops like us and smaller investment advisors could get together. It's a conference, and so they had the opportunity to listen to really what the variety of markets expectations are for where interest rates are headed. So we know we have in the camp some firms are expecting significant rate hikes, other firms are expecting no, to remain on pause, and other firms are expecting that, hey, the Fed is going to pick back up and start to lower rates. So we're in this period where there is this tremendous amount of uncertainty and this big
Sounds
dispersion
like it,
of opinions.
From increasing to
Yes.
lowering again.
Exactly. So that being said, we do know though, when we look at the actual data here, of course, we can see that the inflation numbers have moved up. Consumer price index is at 4.2. Economic growth has been steady. We wouldn't call it strong at 2.1%, but certainly steady. And much of that has been driven not only from consumer spending, but also from government spending. That has been a big contributor as well. employment picture, unemployment rate is remaining fairly stable. Job growth has been uneven, to say the least. We will receive a new jobs number here Thursday before the Friday holiday. And again, the range of expectations for the jobs number is also very wide. It tends to be much narrower as we're much closer to the release of that number, but the range is still very, very wide.
The current rate, is that national rate is
Yes.
4.3? Okay.
Yeah.
Because the state, I think, is less than that. And I looked, the last time I looked for Portage, I think in April, it was like 3.2. It dropped significantly.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder why.
Yeah, because we were up to 4.2.
Right.
We were actually 1 point in time higher than the
Yes.
state's 4.3. I think we were like 4.6, but
Right,
just, that's interesting.
yeah, and I think a lot of it that, big variation sometimes we see, or
Mhm.
disparity between, that relationship between, say, national versus
Yeah.
state versus then local, sometimes can be also attributable just to the way the math works. So as far as what goes into the denominator versus the numerator, and if we're in an area where folks are not part of the labor force,
Yeah.
then it can result in bringing that unemployment rate down, because if the number of people employed really hasn't changed, but the number of people in the labor force has dropped, then your unemployment rate looks
Mhm.
better.
Well, it's always just a sort of like a placeholder or an idea.
Yes.
It's never, because it's always skewed by different things.
Yes.
People that fall off of unemployment, but are
Yes.
still unemployed, but not on, yeah.
Yeah, so exactly, yeah,
Sort of like a benchmark.
right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so interest rates, they have moved up here of late, particularly as a result of, again, this uncertainty in the marketplace, as well as the increased inflation that we are experiencing today. So, moving on to Chairman Warsh, as we said, this was the June 16th, 17th was his first Fed meeting in the chair, as Federal Reserve Chair. A little history about Chairman Warsh. He previously sat on the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve Board back in, during the financial crisis era. So that 2007, 8, 9, 10 era. He then resigned from the board, I believe it was in 2011. And the reason why he resigned is because he did not support what the Federal Reserve was doing as far as the massive expansion of their balance sheet continuing into 2011. So he felt he wasn't being able to make a difference, and so he therefore resigned. So now he's coming back in, again, as chair versus just a board member, but as chair, and he will be able to have more of an impact really on driving the Federal Reserve along the lines of how he feels monetary policy should occur in the US. So a couple things that are his tenets of his view. One is reduce the amount of noise that comes out of the Federal Reserve from a guidance perspective. So when we think back to the Chairman Greenspan days, who unfortunately just passed away at the ripe age of 100. But when we think back to his days and prior, the Federal Reserve really did not communicate, oh, hey, we think rates should be higher, or we think this is what everybody's opinion is, everyone out on the speaking circuit expressing their opinions. It was rather more of a, from the market's perspective, market developing their own view and acting upon that, which results in the level of interest rates, and then seeing what the Fed actually does with monetary policy. Because we know the Federal Reserve really can only impact that short-term interest rate. Now, they have been able to impact the longer-term interest rates through their balance sheet activities by increasing the balance sheet and then reducing it and then increasing it again during the COVID days. But traditionally, their focus has been on short-term rates. So Fed Chairman now Warsh believes that we need to get out of this manipulation of the longer-term rates through the balance sheet management, get the balance sheet down to a position that allows, the proper functioning of the financial markets, the the bank activity and the like. And so, of course, that is going to take some time to get in place because they have a task force formed to then, of course, work with the banks to determine what is really that appropriate level, how is that going to work. But we know that that is a direction that the Fed will be moving in. And then to the first point I made, which is cutting back on the amount of chatter, guidance coming out of all of the Fed members that can sway really the market based on just one person's opinion. So, to give you an example, we had the meeting in June, the wrap up on the 17th, so now the blackout period is out when people can speak. So we had 2 Fed members who were interviewed and asked about, in essence, their forecasts or whatever. One declined to comment. Another one presented their same, response to describing, what their opinion was on where rates were headed and the like. So I guess when we look at that, we say, okay, well, are some members of the Fed who are aligned with the new chairman's view, and there are others where will be work to be done to get these changes to take place. So from our standpoint as an investor and looking at interest rates, there will be a change in the information flow that we receive that's non-specific to the actual data. And from our standpoint, we think that's a positive, that now the market and investors can focus on the data. And the markets can operate like a free market, like they were set up to do so. But it's all going to take some time. So more to come on that, because we know one person cannot make all these decisions. It is a committee. So this is, again, like I said, what the market is expecting now. This is looking at those Fed funds futures and looking at where the market expects will happen to that overnight rate by the end of this year. So we can see prior to the Iran conflict, the market was expecting, 2 rate cuts on average by the end of 26. Once the conflict started, we got into a pattern of, the market was on hold because, again, not knowing the length of time that the conflict would take, what the outcome would be, how this would impact things, particularly like the price of oil. And now we can see that that has spiked up to where now the market is expecting 1 hike, again, because inflation has, perhaps become a little more embedded into the cost of goods and services than what was originally expected. So rather than this perhaps just being a quick supply shock, it's maybe a supply shock that then is bleeding into longer term inflation. But it's very interesting to look at. We've got the Fed funds market believing that. But when we look at what the market is expecting from the 1-year forward expected consumer price index, this is a 1-year forward inflation number, we can see that number has come down. So the market is kind of sending this mixed message of, okay, rates maybe need to be higher because of inflation, but we don't think inflation is going to remain at the levels that it has been, which is this elevated, 4.2, that we're going to get back to a much more manageable level of inflation. And really, when we also now look and see what has happened to the price of oil has come down significantly from its height of about 110, 115 to today down to the low 70s. That's a pretty significant drop in oil prices, almost getting us back to where we were pre-conflict. And so, of course, that should flow through into the price of gas for the consumer, price of energy that's used to create electricity, the transportation costs to move goods and services or deliver goods and services throughout the country. But so as long as that price of oil remains low, yes, that can result in this inflation number coming back down again. So a lot of moving pieces here, to say the least. But as we had mentioned, the economic growth has been very stable. not strong, but certainly there. And one of the metrics that we look at is the retail sales number to get an idea, is the consumer still spending? And we can see that the consumer has continued to spend because retail sales are up pretty significantly. Now granted, we know that much of that retail sales activity, that increase in sales, is concentrated in the higher wage earners versus the lower wage earners who, of course, do not have the capacity necessarily to absorb those higher energy costs, and we have seen delinquencies start to rise in things like auto loans, and even a little bit in mortgages. A big increase in the delinquencies on student loans because as they required the student loans to start the repayment last year, the delinquencies picked back up. Another piece that we look at is the initial jobless claims number. This gives us an idea of companies laying off people. Do we need to start to be worried about the employment picture? Do we need to start to be worried about the income levels of the consumer? And we can see that the initial jobless claims numbers remain very low. And certainly have not moved upwards. We kind of have that bar there of the worry level of around 325,000 weekly initial jobless claims. So we know we're in this environment where, there's very few layoffs collectively, but the offset is that companies are not hiring as much as they would in the past. And some of that, of course, we know is probably AI related.
And technology.
Yes, technology,
Mhm.
which can be a good thing. Yeah, and it's interesting because when we think about the AI thing, that's a big concern. Well, it's going to eliminate so many positions. It probably will, but in the same token, there will still always need to be folks who can then interpolate what AI puts out or manage the AI process. And so it's like,
you have to manage it because AI doesn't always have concise, accurate
Yes.
information. So you have to check and verify it.
right, yeah, interesting story from my standpoint. So at work, we're implementing this new software. Our compliance department is implementing this new software program where everyone's outside vendor contracts have to be managed in one spot. So, Meter's a pretty good sized firm, so we have all these different departments, all these different vendor relationships, and, someone has to be an owner of those vendor relationships, and also to get a feel for, who all is using, say, Adobe, and what are they using it for, so from the AI standpoint. So they go through this training thing, show us the software, and then, of course, we have a deadline when we have to go in there and do our stuff. So I go in there, and I'm like, I don't see anything of mine, because I have one software that I'm an owner of. I'm like, I don't see anything of mine. So I reached out to our gentleman we have an AI guy about it. I say, did I miss something here? Because I'm not seeing any, he looks at it, he goes, oh, Eileen, AI put you in the wrong department. Yeah, it's not seeing what is yours. I'm thinking, yeah, there's AI. It didn't do what it's supposed to do. I love it. No, I am not in that other department. I am in public funds. That's what all of my things say. All right, any event. So yield curve, what's happening here with interest rates? So this is looking at the yield curve at the end of the year compared to where the yield curve was here at the end of last week. And we can see, of course, this big increase in rates that has occurred over the course of the year. Most of this increase has occurred since about early March till now. So rates are significantly higher, particularly in the spectrum that we can invest in, to the extent of when we can invest, but significantly higher than what they were coming into the year. And so, of course, that creates opportunities for investment. All right. Excuse me. So looking at the county's investment portfolio, cash is down clearly at the 12.2 million relative to the investments of 180 $2 million relative to the total of $194 million. The cash represents now, this is at the end of the month, 6% of the total. So when we look at historically what has been our range, in 2025, our cash on average about 16% of our total combined cash and securities, but it ranged from 6% to 32%. So of course, the spike, just like we saw in February, was when the tax collection, cycle and monies come in. The 6% is, of course, when we're in that lull. So clearly, we are in that lull now at the 6%, and we actually have started to move some monies out of the investments into the cash because that percentage has continued to get a bit lower. So that being said, that accounts for why also our securities portion has dropped. We were at $190 million, I think, last quarter. We're now at $182 million. The weighted average yield on the securities is 3.86. That's about unchanged from where we were. We were at 3.85, but when we do that simple calculation, taking the average yield times the securities portion as of this point in time, the estimated annual interest income is down. And that's a function of we have less invested. So of course, as we have less invested, then that looking forward, from a looking forward standpoint, we would be earning less income for the county. Our allocation of funds, at this point, we had 39% maturing beyond 3 years. That's right about where we would like it to be. And the balance maturing inside of 3 years. Our lower yielding securities are in that 0 to 1 year bucket, so as those roll off and they either move out of the portfolio or are reinvested, then that yield on the portfolio should rise. In the June to August period, which would be our next quarter, we do have $10 million maturing. Of that $10 million, we've already redeemed $4 million and moved that into cash, as we have mentioned, to help have the proper liquidity for the county. We do know that some of the liquidity needs are, of course, being impacted by what's happening with the property tax collection cycle as a result of what's happening at the state level, as we understand. Our purchases this past quarter here, again, we invested those funds to the extent that, not overloading too much of the long term, but allocating it across the maturity spectrum to yield a 3.85%. That was up from our previous quarter purchases of 3.75%. So again, utilizing those securities that are permissible under code.
So some of these are short term.
Yes.
It looks like it looks like in August, September.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, because we always want to maintain at least about 20% of the portfolio maturing within the next 12 months. So we were right on that,
Okay.
at that benchmark at the end of May. And one way we do that is by when we have maturities, keeping some of them just rolled over shorter term. Projected income, this is looking just at the securities portion, so this does not include things like the local bank CDs, the Portage Community CDs and such. And so we know last quarter, monies were moved from securities into an additional CD purchase with Portage Community, so that interest isn't impacted here. But that being said, 2026 interest income based on securities, this assumes no reinvestment either. We'll approach the $8 million mark, but because we're not assuming any reinvestments and we know the amount of funds that are invested have been dropping, our reinvestment activity has been falling, that 2027 interest income is projected to be lower, but in line with what we had previously projected. So this is just that historical view of the statistics, 2007 going back quite a ways to 2026. And, of course, we can see that the amount invested, the 181 million, is down from the 12/31 level of 188 million. And of course, that translates into that annualized interest, a lower annualized interest income number, although the weighted average yield on the securities is the same at this stage. And then lastly, of course, we have the individual portfolio holdings. All of the detail behind the investments that the county does own.
Okay,
Okay, any questions?
I do not. Joe, did you have any questions?
I do not know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hearing no questions, we'll move to other business, Joe?
I just wanted to give you an update on GrowLink. We talked about that last time.
Yes,
We
thank you.
prepared a sheet that is, it actually gives the name of the loan was issued to.
Mhm.
These are outstanding loans and then the original loan amount. So currently we have $2.2 million, $2.3 million on outstanding loans. We've actually totally loaned out 3.1 million, and there's a $711,000 available amount that's available still for loans to be loaned out. It gives you some idea of the interest rate and also the date funded and the term. So, you know, as these come due, we reinvest and reloan out. But
Mhm.
it gives an idea of what's outstanding at the moment.
Yeah, I appreciate this.
And I'll just
And you-
continue to
Yeah, if you
update
would,
this.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful,
Mhm.
just so that we see, because, you know, at one point in time, it's all we could do to get $1 million spent,
Sure.
you know, or loaned out, I should say. And then, you know, as we expanded the products and the purposes for the funding, it tended to go up. We increased it to 2 million, now we're at 3 million. So I appreciate, you
The last
sharing
two
all
that we
this.
did were the Dusty Armadillo
Yeah.
and Main Street Deli. Those
Yeah.
were the two for expansion.
Yes.
And then I will tell you that there are inquiries from the area around Black Horse where
Okay.
they're doing the septic system removal, the tie-ins to the county sewer
Mhm.
system. So there've been some inquiries about that, which is really what was one of the
Mhm.
initiating
Yeah, it was
factors
for septics, because
Yeah.
folks, you know, needed a good low interest loan, and
Right.
maybe they didn't qualify at an institution, or not an institution, or for any other grants or any other, so then they could go to one of the lending institutions and apply, so, at a very reasonable rate, so.
So that's all on that. I just
Oh,
wanted
great.
to
Well, thank
keep
you.
that going.
Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order? Joe, did you have any other comments? I don't.
I do not.
One thing that I did wanna bring, to your attention, on here, the notice of regular meeting minutes, or regular meetings, this should be 26.
And I
And
think the
then-
December date is.
Yeah, it's a Saturday, so I just.
Actually,
wanted to-
Eileen brought that to my attention.
Yeah. Cassie's like, are we meeting on Saturdays? I'm like, what? And then she gave to me,
Absolutely.
and I said, well, let me see that. And I said, well, you know what? We're meeting, we've already met in September according to this. I said, oh, just give it to me, I'll show it to
We'll,
Joe, so.
We'll make an update.
Hey, well, it gets confusing when you go over a 3-year span, right? Cause then you're also going into the 27, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, anyways, well, if hearing nothing else to come before the board, Eileen, you don't have any
Nope, nothing
other
further,
words
thank
of
you.
wisdom? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are officially adjourned.
Thank you very
12:02. So thanks.